Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for another Film Fanatic show. Hope everyone's doing good. I It is Wednesday at 11 o'clock. Um, Next week, just about a week or so, Thanksgiving is here. So we're pretty much virtually into summertime, wintertime time period. So always a good time to watch movies. But hey, some doesn't matter. Summertime, winter, fall, spring, doesn't matter. It's always a good time to watch movies. So last night I went to a special screening of a film at the Colonial Theater. The Colonial Theater is a really amazing movie theater here in Belfast. I live in Northport, Maine, and I live about 6, 7 minutes from Belfast. The Colonial Theater is about 6 or 7 minutes from my house. It's a beautiful theater that's been around for close to 100 years. It's got such a rich history. It was one of the businesses that really, well, I look at it almost like two big blows that it suffered, along with many other places. One being, I mean, that place really somehow managed, but then ultimately had to close because of the pandemic. Of course, the pandemic affected everything and everyone. But that place somehow persevered for quite a while throughout the worst part of it, were, and then eventually they had to close. But they have been reopened for, you know, probably, I don't know, maybe close to a year now. They've been reopened, and they seem to be doing pretty well. They've been showing lots of new releases. I've been going here mostly for these new series that they've been having. They've been showing these. They've been doing these like bi-monthly series of where they're showing these independent films, and I've gone there a few other times. I haven't really been there for any new releases yet, but I intend on going there more, and I want that place to flourish. But and again, it's a movie theater that is, some surviving and doing great things, even though most folks like to watch things on their electronic devices at home. So it's a very different time. It was like a double whammo. I think that most places like that really face because of COVID and then the whole streaming thing. But they're an amazing place, and also Opera House Video, which is the only video store that still exists in Maine, one of probably few in the country at this point that still exists. And the two of them have like kind of started this unique partnership with really helping each other promote events and really putting both of those companies and businesses really on the same page. Really good at getting the word out on social media about events and new releases, and it's really cool to see those two things really join forces, especially now in these strange times. And it's mostly in regards to people's habits. People's changing habits of not necessarily wanting to stay out past 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock anymore. People wanting the luxury of being in their cozy house at the end of the day and having things, you know, at the tip of their fingers without having to physically go somewhere. So it's a very different time. But they've been able to really navigate through this somehow and keep it going. For me, I've always been the person that wants that experience, wants that experience with other like-minded souls and having that interaction, because I feel like experiencing these things, not only the art itself, whatever it is, film, movies, music, going to see an art show, going to a play, whatever it is. To me, of course, it's about that actual experience of it, of digesting the art that you're experiencing, but it's really about also the that communal thing, that connection, and I think that is almost the most important thing, and that seems to be really dwindling these days. So it's really wonderful to see that there are people who really want to have that experience, because I think it's I think it's one of those things that make us human. So anyway, so today's show is on a movie that I saw last night at the Colonial. They've been starting this really cool series where they've been showing these independent films. I went to a show last month and I saw a film there that was this really low budget independent kind of horror film, and it was pretty interesting. And I saw that they've been doing these other series. This is like a continuous series. I think they're gonna go on a break in December next month, and then kind of bring it back where they're doing this bi-monthly series, like showcasing these really low budget independent horror films. And also one of the cool things is they've been having the directors be there as part of the experience. So there's a Q&A afterwards, and it's very personalized. It's very cool. This was my second one, and I went to see a film last night at the Colonial called Bone Cold, and it was directed by Billy Hanson. He's based in L.A. now. I guess he lives in California full time, but he's from Maine originally, and so this film came out actually a few years ago. It is available in physical form, physical media. There's a DVD version of this film available, and I believe there's a Blu-ray version of this film. There are also both of those. I believe you can order those online and watch it on Tubi for free. And then also, there are, like I said, there's DVD. There's a DVD version of it and a Blu-ray version that you can rent at Opera House Video, and I believe you can probably buy it somewhere online. Bone Cold, Bone Cold. So I went to it last night. Didn't know anything about this movie, and it was a pretty cool experience overall. There was a lot of people there too. There was the first showing that I went to of this series for me, which was last month. There was only, three or four other people there. It was very, very quiet, but it was still a great experience. And again, having these experiences, even if I don't really like the movie per se, or I have, say, even issues with the movie, it's the experience itself that is so fun and interesting and magical. That's the thing. So I went to this movie pretty cold. Well, pun intended. The film is called Bone Cold, but I went into it not knowing anything really about this movie. I knew it was a very low budget film. The other thing that was interesting was that this director was going to be flew in from California for the showing, so it was kind of a big deal for him. He also, and his name is Billy Hanson, like I said in the beginning. He also has major ties to Maine, where I live, where we live here, the beautiful state of Maine. And I think about 80%, maybe more, 95% of this film was shot in Maine. So I really wanted to support it, but I really wanted to check it out. I'm all about supporting independent artists. I know how taxing and how much of an uphill battle that is, but it's a very fulfilling thing, even though there is many pitfalls that involves. Working slightly outside of any kind of system and kind of creating your own path. I always really admire people who are willing to throw themselves in the deep end of the pool that way. I just feel like that's really inspiring. Figuring out the ways of trying to be successful, and there's a lot of different ways of people being successful these days, or not. But anyway, so I went to the movie, and it's an interesting movie. I had a really good time. This film it's definitely an action movie. It has horror elements, sci-fi elements. I'd say overall it's still pretty safe to probably call this film a horror film, but it definitely has some interesting ways of blending some different, genres. And there were some things about this film that I really really enjoyed and that I felt really really engaged with. It's essentially about these two military snipers that are called in on this mission to take out this target. And when the situation happens, a bunch of some incredibly strange and some um, potentially dangerous things happen to them along the way, and as as the situation unfolds. And it's interesting because it does blend, kind of an American action aesthetic with, the sci-fi genre, which I really, love, of course, and especially the horror genre, which I really, really love. And it's kind of an interesting thing. And there was a Q&A at the end of the film with the director that I thought was really interesting. So I stayed to the very end. The film is about roughly about 2 hours, and then there was a Q&A which was about for another 40 minutes or so, and that was really interesting. I stayed to the very end, and some of the things I thought were really really cool. The two central characters in this movie that are essentially these two guys that are war veterans, but they were in Afghanistan and I believe Iraq at one point. And the chemistry between these two characters, and especially when they are called back into on this new mission, and essentially it's them in the woods with their sniper gear, and them fending for themselves in the Maine wilderness. The film's location is interesting too because it takes place. The period of it is, I think, modern day, and it's supposed to take place in the wilderness of the Ukraine. But it feels, the cinematography for this film and the locations for this film. Again, like I said, 90-95% of this film was shot in Maine, and it was shot in the dense wilderness, I believe, up north in Maine, and the locations, the cinematography, really beautiful, and it's all shot during the winter time, so it feels real. Everything feels lived in, and it's all real. It's a real environment. There's no blue screen or anything artificial about it. But the chemistry between the two main characters is really interesting. I thought there was some really great music in this film. I thought there was some uh, really great choices in in the editing in this film. There was a lot of tension. I generally thought the chemistry between the two main actors, the two snipers, was really good, really fantastic. And there was a big portion, a large portion of this film where I was really engaged. I really cared about what was happening to them. There was an element of danger, an element of surprise, and there were also moments in this film, they kind of hint a little bit that there's some kind of, otherworldly phenomenon going on. But right up until that point, there were moments of or even when they slowly introduced those moments, there were some definite moments where I didn't really see or couldn't really see where the film was going to go. Like, it was a little bit unpredictable, which I really liked. I thought it kept me engaged. I thought there was some good intensity, great chemistry. The environment that the film was set was really interesting. I thought overall it was their chemistry. The writing was really great. I felt invested. It felt real. Um, the stakes felt really high. There was an element of danger, and there was a sense of danger, but and again, it didn't feel like it was very predictable. I did not know. I was curious to see where this film was going to go once it reached a certain point, and I did not know um, where it was going to go from certain points. And I like that about certain films where, something dramatic can happen maybe early on in the film, and then you have those moments of where you're like, wow, I don't know where this is going to go from this from this high point. And this film had that. I thought there was an area of tension around those things, and a level of where it was not where it was unpredictable, which in this day and age is sometimes hard to find. It's a lot of the times, studios and filmmakers will want to play things somewhat safe to make sure people will still, you know, stay in the seats and want to pay attention to it. And sometimes that is a downfall because, I think big time Hollywood studios, especially, really underestimate the public. And I think they really assume that everyone who goes to a film is kind of dumb. Um, and again, a lot of good suspense throughout this film. Um, and when they start introducing the kind of the horror elements or the sci-fi elements, it's very cool. It's very interesting. They do a cool thing with the whole less is more. You get a sense of this creature or this, ominous presence in the woods, but you don't actually see it. And they show these like little shadows or little quick little clips where you see this creature, you know, uh, this some kind of entity, or it's like a, some kind of creature living in the woods, and you get a sense of it. You don't really see it, but when they show little bits and pieces of it, it's very, very interesting, and it's actually really good. And again, this film has really great action. It's an action movie too. There's a lot of great suspense with a lot of sniper fire and attacks. There's some really good kills in this movie. I was really surprised by how the level of that is really rich and pretty high. I was really invested in that. The One of the main characters, the one where I felt the movie for me kind of where I was starting where I felt the movie kind of missed the mark, and I'm not sure why they did it. I think I know why. It's probably because of financial reasons. But there is a portion or a moment in the movie where they kind of do reveal, quote unquote, what the monster is, and the main character's interaction with the monster. And a lot of the time, or monsters, a lot of the times, most of the time in horror films, there's always, kind of that grand reveal, or you only see glimpses of the monster. If there is a that kind of a aesthetic in the movie, you will there's usually always that reveal, and that comes along with the effects. Whether the filmmakers are using digital effects or practical effects, whether it's like pretty low end CGI or high end CGI. So there's all usually those elements always kind of creep into a movie, particularly even if it's a movie that is somewhat of a slow burn or a octane film that is coming at you a mile a minute. I prefer the film that I mean, I love the fast-paced films, but I prefer films that have a little bit of a slower pace because I can kind of digest it a little bit slower, and I feel when that happens, I am being pulled into the experience more and more. So in this film, there more or less is a reveal of the creature or this force of nature, and I I felt when they did that, um, the way they used the effects, and I believe it was all. I mean, it's definitely CGI. There's no practical effects in this movie, which I was really, really disappointed with. It felt like everything was whenever they use like effects, like the actual kills, the fight scenes, the battle scenes between these soldiers, and there's also this other character in this story that is also a rival sniper who is an amazing character. But when they're engaging this way, and there are a bunch of kills, it's really good and it's really well done. It looks real. It looks practical. I believe it was probably uh, used. Computers were used, but it's really effective. It looks really tight, clean, and just looks real. And there might have been some practical effects in it, but I think it was mostly computer generated. But they did a really great job with it. If it was computer generated, it's really seamless. But I felt when they introduced this creature or this entity that is in this woods, in the location that they are in, I thought it looked really bad. I thought it looked really terrible, and it was just to me it was just like really low grade computer generated like CGI. And there is some gore in this movie. This movie is pretty dark. There are like again there are a lot of kills. There's actually a huge body count in this movie, which I was surprised and liked. And again, when it was between the snipers and the soldiers fighting in the wilderness, some really great kills. Some really surprising twists. There were times where people jumped in their seats. But when they do go further into introducing this creature or this monster, if you will, and then they go further into the gore factor where they show more blood and guts, literally. I thought when they started getting into that territory, the effects that were used just looked awful, really bad, really low grade. Um, it felt like it was just the cheapest kind of CGI that they could find. Um, and I will have to say when they were doing when it moved into that territory, it really took me out of the fucking movie. Um, and again there's not a lot of that fortunately in the movie, but it does play a pretty big role in the movie at one point, and it kind of is a big part of the story. And I felt the CGI, the graphics that they used looked so bad, and I was just like, the first thing I thought um, was, why couldn't they just I would have loved to have seen a guy in a suit at that point. I would have been happy to see somebody running around in the snow with a good costume. But I thought, why did they go down that route? I think it's maybe because they wanted to save money, because I realize it's probably another huge expense to have practical effects and to have an actual creature designer involved. But I think it really made this movie go off the rails. I really wanted to see practical effects, and I really wanted to see a good creature design, and there was none of that in this movie. It was really um, uh, the effects were terrible, and it could have if they used it made me think of Tom Savini, one of the wizard of practical effects. When I think of all of the movies that he did in the 80s and 70s, all the amazing slasher films, those guys didn't have any money at all, like no budget whatsoever. But everything is practical. You're seeing everything, on cam, in camera, and they're building these things. And I'm like, why couldn't they at least try to go down that route with this film? I can't see how it would have been more expensive compared to the really low grade technology that they used for their practical effects. I don't understand it. And again, it was like I'm all about the creature design, and I would have been way more satisfied if it was literally a dude in a suit. But they could have done so many different things. They could have gotten more creative. They could have made it interesting. They could have made it like at least feel like it's something that's real and it has a real presence. But it looked just really bad, like this bad computer hologram um, image. It was completely computer generated, and it just looked really bad. And it was like all up until that point, everything felt real. Again, the kills in the beginning of the film or in the second act all looked real. I was invested in it. It looked good. Like the opening, everything like was pretty on par. And then there's a scene in this film too where when they do have this plot reveal of the monster or this creature, there's a scene of where it's incredibly gory, and there's a guy, one of the characters gets his stomach ripped open, and there's guts and intestines, and it's very bloody and gory. And I think if it was if they used practical effects, um, it would have been amazing, and it would have kept me in the movie. Again, when I think of going back even further, Herschel Gordon Lewis, the Godfather of gore. I mean, he shot so many fucking movies for like no money whatsoever, and I'm like, he was all about practical effects, and that shit looks amazing now, amazing. And some of the stuff came out in the '60s. So I don't understand the logic of why they did that. You know, so that was one thing I thought, or those two things in the film really kind of took me out of the film. I felt like, okay, it was so blaringly obvious. The graphics were so bad and um, so terrible that it just took me out of me feeling invested in the film that way. Um, and again, this cast in this film is really good. For the most part, the two main characters, I thought the chemistry between them was really great. I thought the writing was really great. The ensemble cast is really good. The editing for this film is really good. The pacing, it's exciting. There's a lot of intensity to it. But I feel like one of the main characters has this relationship with his family, and I thought that was not very good. I didn't really believe it. I felt like it was um, it was so below of the other characterizations between, especially in comparison to the main characters, the two snipers. One of the main characters has this relationship with his family, and they are a part of this film, and I felt like there was no real chemistry. It felt like all the creative decisions and the writing was focused mainly on the two main characters, but not so much on the family and it. I didn't believe it. And I felt like the dialogue wasn't very good, um, and it wasn't really believable. I didn't really care about them because of that. So that part was kind of disappointing because that was also a pretty big part of this movie. It felt like the writing was really good at moments, but it felt like, especially around the situation with the dynamic around, well, the main characters and his family, that was kind of secondary. It wasn't. They did that after focusing on this main thing of the film, whereas I felt like, that's a huge part of the story, and I felt like it was subpar. It wasn't believable. The dialogue was really not exciting. Kind of things were ham-handed to you a little bit. That was disappointing. Um, the other thing about this movie that I was disappointed with was I thought this movie was a little bit too long. That was also a problem I had with the other film I saw. I liked it a lot, but I thought the film dragged ass a little too long. It felt like, I mean, the movie probably wasn't quite that long, but it felt like a long 2 hours. I believe Bone Cold was a full 2 hours, but it dragged, and it felt like, it almost felt like there was more than one ending to this film, and I felt like it could have been shortened a little bit. I think what happened for me was those 2 or 3 moments around where I felt like I was starting to check out of the movie quite a bit. Around the effects that were going on, and the really terrible computer generated effects, and the story with the family. Yeah. But other than that, I thought it was great. I was actually really into it, and I was excited. And I'm like, wow. I was like this. I remember looking around and like, I'm like, this is actually really good. Like this feels like a really good movie. So it had all of this stuff that was fantastic and great, and it does have some interesting, genre influences. So action and mystery to a degree, sci-fi and horror. It's got an interesting blend of genres. But ultimately, those two or three major things really disappointed me and kind of took me out of the movie. I think there were overall there was for me there was mostly it was mostly a really enjoyable experience. There was some really exciting moments, and I believe that this was the filmmaker's first movie. And there's some potential here for him to be a really great director. But ultimately, I thought it was pretty mixed, and especially with those things that came up for me in the film. But anyway, if you get a chance, support independent artists. It's very important. Um, it is available online, bone cold. So check it out. All right. Thank you very much, and we will see you next time. Peace.